The recruitment station on Kepler 442b hummed with the quiet efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Commander Zefix of the Galactic Defense Corps stood behind his polished metallic desk, his four arms moving in practice coordination as he processed applications from various species across the galaxy. His crystalline skin caught the artificial light, casting rainbow patterns across the sterile white walls. Today felt routine, almost boring, until the human delegation arrived. Marcus Chun stepped through the sliding doors first, his boots echoing against the metal flooring. Behind him walked his younger brother, David, barely 18 standard years old, but carrying himself with the quiet confidence that seemed inherent to his species. The humans had only recently been discovered by the Galactic Council, their small blue planet tucked away in an unremarkable spiral arm of the Milky Way. Most species regarded them as primitives, barely worth acknowledging. Yet here they were, seeking to join the most elite military force in known space. "Commander Zefix," Marcus said, offering a crisp salute that would have made any drill sergeant proud. "I'm Captain Marcus Chun, Human Defense Forces. This is my brother, David Chun. We're here for the recruitment trials." Zefix's upper pair of eyes focused on the humans, while his lower pair continued reviewing data on his holographic display. Humans were fascinating creatures, bipedal mammals who had somehow managed to avoid destroying themselves long enough to achieve spaceflight. Their planet was a chaotic mess of different nations, languages, and cultures, yet they had somehow managed to present a unified front when first contact was established. "Ah yes, the humans," Zefix said, his translator rendering his crystalline voice into perfect English. "I must admit, your species has generated considerable interest among the council members. Some call you promising, others call you dangerous. Very few call you both." David stepped forward, his young face serious beyond his years. "With respect, sir, we didn't come here to be judged on reputation. We came here to prove ourselves." The commander's lower eyes, finally, shifted to the younger human. There was something about this one, something that made Zefix's internal sensors tingle with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. The boy possessed the same lean build as most humans, but there was a coiled energy beneath his calm exterior that reminded the commander of a compressed spring waiting to release. "The Galactic Defense Corps is not a place for children to play soldier," Zefix warned, though not unkindly. "We face threats that would make your worst nightmares seem like pleasant dreams. The Void Spawn, the Hive Collectives, rogue AI networks that consume entire star systems. Are you certain you understand what you're volunteering for?" Marcus placed a protective hand on his brother's shoulder. "Sir, David scored higher than anyone in our military's history on every aptitude test we have. Strategic thinking, tactical analysis, combat effectiveness, adaptability under pressure. He's not here because he's young and stupid. He's here because he's the best we have to offer." Bold words, Zefix mused, pulling up the human's test scores on his display. The numbers were impressive, even by galactic standards. Still, numbers on a screen meant little when facing down a void spawn dreadnought or infiltrating a hive nest. "Tell me, young David, why do you wish to join the Corps?" David's answer came without hesitation. "Because someone has to stand between the innocent and the darkness. Because every species in this galaxy deserves the right to exist freely. Because if we don't fight for what's right, who will?" The sincerity in the human's voice caught Zefix off guard. Most recruits came seeking glory, wealth, or adventure. Few spoke of duty and protection with such genuine conviction. Perhaps there was more to these humans than initial assessments suggested. "Very well," Zefix said, activating a series of holographic interfaces. "The trials begin immediately. You'll face 5 challenges designed to test different aspects of military readiness: combat effectiveness, strategic thinking, leadership under pressure, technological adaptation, and psychological resilience. Fair warning, the mortality rate for these trials hovers around 30%. "Understood, sir," both humans replied in unison. The first trial took place in the combat simulation chamber, a massive spherical room lined with holographic projectors capable of creating any environment imaginable. David found himself standing in the middle of what appeared to be a devastated city, smoke rising from collapsed buildings while the distant sound of weapons fire echoed through the streets. "Your mission is simple," Zefix's voice explained through the chamber speakers. "Extract 3 civilian survivors from the combat zone and escort them to the evacuation point. You'll face opposition from Hive Collective drones. Failure to protect the civilians results in immediate disqualification." The simulation began without warning. Insectoid shapes darted between the rubble, their energy weapons casting deadly streams of light through the smoky air. David rolled behind an overturned vehicle, quickly assessing his environment. The standard-issue plasma rifle felt familiar in his hands despite being of alien design. Human weapons weren't so different in principle, just less advanced. 3 red markers appeared on his tactical display, indicating civilian locations scattered across the battlefield. The evacuation point lay 2 kilometers away through enemy-controlled territory. David studied the patrol patterns of the Hive drones, noting their systematic search methods and predictable movement cycles. Most recruits would charge straight toward the closest civilian, relying on superior firepower to blast through opposition. David took a different approach. He moved like a ghost through the ruins, using the drone's own predictable patterns against them. When one patrol passed his position, he would slip in behind them, using their bodies as unwitting shields against other enemy units. The first civilian was a terrified Altarian trader, his blue skin pale with shock. "Please," he whispered in heavily accented Galactic standard. "My family, they're still somewhere in the city." "I'll find them," David promised, surprising himself with how easily the alien language flowed from his tongue. "But first, I need to get you to safety." Instead of taking the direct route to the evacuation point, David led the civilian through a series of abandoned buildings, staying below street level whenever possible. When they encountered enemy patrols, he would motion for the civilian to remain hidden while he eliminated threats with surgical precision. Each shot was carefully calculated to avoid alerting nearby enemy units. The second civilian proved more challenging to reach. A wounded Zendan engineer was trapped beneath debris while Hive drones systematically searched the surrounding area. David waited patiently for 47 minutes, studying enemy movement patterns until he identified a 12-second window where he could reach the engineer undetected. "Human," the engineer gasped in amazement as David carefully lifted the debris. "But your species just joined the council." "Doesn't matter where I'm from," David replied, applying emergency medical foam to the engineer's injuries. "What matters is getting you home to your family." The third civilian extraction required genuine creativity. An elderly Vakari diplomat was trapped in a building that had become the center of a Hive drone patrol route. Direct assault would mean fighting through dozens of enemies, likely resulting in civilian casualties. Instead, David spent 2 hours carefully sabotaging the building's structural supports. When a Hive patrol entered for their next sweep, David triggered a controlled collapse that brought down only the rear section of the building, creating a debris barrier that blocked enemy reinforcements. The diplomat was shaken but unharmed, and David was able to escort all 3 civilians to the evacuation point without losing a single life. "Time," Zefix announced. Simulation complete. The destroyed city faded away, replaced by the chamber's plain metallic walls. David blinked in the sudden brightness, surprised to find himself slightly disoriented. The simulation had felt completely real, right down to the weight of responsibility he'd felt for the civilians under his protection. "Interesting approach," Zefix commented, reviewing the tactical data. "Most recruits attempt to complete that scenario in under 2 hours using direct confrontation. You took nearly 4 hours, but achieved a perfect score with 0 civilian casualties and minimal ammunition expenditure." Marcus smiled proudly from the observation deck. His brother had always been different, approaching problems from angles that others never considered. Where most people saw obstacles, David saw puzzles waiting to be solved. The second trial tested strategic thinking on a galactic scale. David stood before a massive 3-dimensional star map, dozens of systems highlighted in various colors representing different threats and resources. The scenario involved coordinating the defense of 17 worlds against 3 separate enemy incursions while managing limited fleet resources. You have 30 minutes, Zephyx explained, to develop a comprehensive strategy that maximizes civilian evacuations while maintaining tactical flexibility. David studied the map with intense concentration, his mind working through hundreds of variables simultaneously. Fleet positioning, supply lines, evacuation routes, enemy movement patterns, civilian population distributions. To most observers, it would have appeared overwhelmingly complex. To David, it was simply another puzzle. He began by identifying which worlds could be defended and which would need to be evacuated. Rather than spreading his forces thin across all 17 systems, he chose to establish 3 defensive strongpoints that could support each other while funneling civilian evacuation ships through protected corridors. "You're abandoning 6 worlds," Zephyx observed, not without criticism. "I'm saving 11," David replied without looking up from the tactical display. Sometimes the greatest victory is knowing what you can't save so you can focus on what you can. His strategy was unconventional, but undeniably effective. By concentrating his forces, he created overlapping fields of fire that maximized defensive effectiveness. The evacuation corridors he established were protected by mobile defense platforms that could reposition as needed. Most importantly, his plan included contingencies for every major threat scenario. Tom Zephyx called. The star map faded, leaving David staring at empty air. The strategic thinking trial had been even more mentally exhausting than the combat simulation. Planning the fates of billions of lives was not a responsibility he took lightly. The third trial tested leadership under extreme pressure. David was placed in command of a mixed squad of alien soldiers, each from different species with different combat doctrines and cultural backgrounds. Their mission was to infiltrate an enemy facility and retrieve critical intelligence while maintaining squad cohesion. The squad members were actually experienced Corps veterans participating in the trial as part of their own ongoing training. They had been instructed to follow orders, but also to challenge any human who tried to command them. After all, why should warriors from ancient military traditions follow orders from a primitive species that had barely mastered spaceflight? "Listen up," David addressed his squad in the briefing room. "I know what you're thinking. Humans are new, untested, probably not worth following into battle. You're right about being new. You're wrong about everything else." Sergeant Krolix, a massive reptilian warrior from the Saurian Empire, snorted in derision. Human whelp thinks he can command warriors who are fighting wars before his species discovered fire. "You're absolutely right, Sergeant," David replied calmly. "Your species has been perfecting the art of war for millennia. That's exactly why I need you watching my 6 during this mission. Your experience could save all our lives." The unexpected response caught Krolix off guard. Most young officers would have responded with anger or attempted to assert dominance. This human had instead acknowledged the sergeant's superior experience while making it clear that such experience was valued and necessary. "Corporal Zinthi," David continued, addressing an ethereal Amarian scout, "your people's ability to phase through solid matter makes you invaluable for reconnaissance. I need you to scout our primary infiltration route and identify any security measures we might not be expecting." One by one, David addressed each squad member, demonstrating detailed knowledge of their species' capabilities while making it clear that their unique skills were essential to mission success. Instead of trying to impose human military doctrine, he adapted his leadership style to accommodate different cultural expectations. The infiltration itself required careful coordination between team members with vastly different strengths and weaknesses. Corporal Zinthi could phase through walls, but was vulnerable to energy weapons. Sergeant Krolix was nearly indestructible, but too large for stealth approaches. Private Keck possessed natural camouflage abilities, but lacked physical strength. David orchestrated their movements like a conductor leading an orchestra, each team member playing their part in perfect harmony. When they encountered unexpected security measures, he adapted their approach in real time, never losing sight of their primary objective while ensuring everyone made it home alive. Squad performance. Exemplary, Zephyx noted with barely concealed amazement. I've seen veteran officers struggle to achieve that level of coordination with experienced teams. The fourth trial focused on technological adaptation. David was presented with alien equipment he'd never seen before and given 30 minutes to master its operation well enough to complete a complex technical task. The device appeared to be some sort of multidimensional scanner capable of detecting hidden threats across multiple layers of reality. Most species required months of training to properly operate such advanced technology. Humans, however, seemed to possess an almost intuitive understanding of how complex systems functioned. David spent the first 10 minutes simply examining the device, running his hands over its surfaces and studying the arrangement of its controls. Interesting, he murmured, activating what appeared to be a diagnostic mode. The control interface is based on mathematical harmonics rather than logical sequences. Instead of thinking about what each control does individually, I need to consider how they interact as a unified system. Within 20 minutes, David was operating the scanner with the efficiency of a trained technician. He successfully identified and categorized 17 different threat signatures, including several that were supposedly undetectable by most scanning technologies. Ow! Zefix asked, genuinely puzzled. That device requires years of specialized training. Human brains are weird, David admitted with a slight smile. We're really good at recognizing patterns, even in systems we've never seen before. Once you understand the problem, figuring out the tool becomes much easier. The fifth and final trial was designed to test psychological resilience under extreme stress. David was placed in a sensory deprivation chamber and subjected to a series of mental challenges while experiencing simulated combat stress, sleep deprivation, and emotional manipulation. The trial began simply enough. David floated in absolute darkness, cut off from all external stimuli, while alien technology interfaced directly with his nervous system. At first, he felt only peaceful quiet, but that tranquility didn't last long. Images began flashing through his mind. Scenes of death and destruction, civilian casualties, failed missions, comrades dying because of his mistakes. The technology was sophisticated enough to create completely convincing false memories, making it impossible to distinguish between real experiences and manufactured trauma. Your brother is dead, a voice whispered in the darkness. You led him into battle and watch him die. Everyone you've ever tried to protect has suffered because of your failures. David's training kicked in immediately. His father had been a military psychologist before joining active duty and had taught both his sons techniques for maintaining mental resilience under extreme pressure. Instead of fighting the false images, David acknowledged them as external stimuli while maintaining focus on his core identity. I am David Chun, he whispered in the darkness. I am human. I am here to protect others. These images are not real, and even if they were, dwelling on failure prevents future success. The psychological assault intensified. The technology began targeting his deepest fears and insecurities, manufacturing scenarios designed to break his mental resolve. David experienced watching his home planet burn, felt the weight of commanding soldiers in a hopeless battles, endured the crushing responsibility of making decisions that affected billions of lives. Through it all, he maintained his psychological anchor points. His name, his purpose, his commitment to protecting others. When the false memories tried to convince him he was a monster, he remembered the civilians he'd saved in the first trial. When manufactured guilt tried to overwhelm him, he focused on the squad members who had trusted his leadership. Remarkable, Zefix muttered, studying the readouts from David's neural monitoring equipment. His stress indicators are elevated, but his core personality matrix remains completely stable. Most candidates begin showing signs of psychological fracturing within the first hour. The trial continued for 6 hours, with the psychological pressure increasing steadily. By the end, David was experiencing simulated scenarios that would have driven most beings to complete mental breakdown. Yet somehow, he emerged from the chamber with his sanity intact and his resolve unshaken. Ow! Zefix asked again, though by now he was beginning to understand that asking humans to explain their capabilities was an exercise in futility. "My brother taught me something when I was young," David replied, though his voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had just endured psychological torture. He said that the strongest part of any person isn't their body or their mind. It's their choice to keep going even when everything else fails. "You can break my body, you can confuse my mind, but you can't break my choice to protect others unless I let you." Commander Zefix reviewed the trial results with growing amazement. In his 3 centuries of service with the Galactic Defense Corps, he had never seen a single candidate excel so dramatically across every category of testing. David Chun hadn't just passed the trials. He had redefined what was possible. "Congratulations," Zefix said formally, though his voice carried genuine warmth. "You have successfully completed all recruitment trials and are hereby accepted into the Galactic Defense Corps as a junior officer, pending final council approval." Marcus stepped forward to embrace his brother, pride and worry warring in his expression. "I'm proud of you, David, but I'm also scared as hell. The Corps faces threats that make our worst enemies look like children playing with toys." "I know," David replied quietly, "but that just means they need all the help they can get." As the Chun brothers prepared to leave the recruitment station, neither of them noticed the small device that Zefix activated on his desk. The commander was sending a priority communication directly to Corps High Command, flagging David Chun for immediate attention from the Council's Strategic Planning Division. "Priority message for General Thane." Zefix spoke into the recorder. "Human recruit David Chun shows unprecedented potential for advanced tactical operations. Recommend immediate assignment to Special Operations Division upon completion of basic training. This individual may represent a significant tactical advantage in upcoming operations against unknown threats." The message was transmitted instantly across the galaxy, reaching Corps headquarters within minutes. General Thane, a veteran officer who had commanded defense operations against the worst threats imaginable, read the report with growing interest. Humans were still largely unknown quantities, but early reports suggested they possessed capabilities that could prove invaluable in the coming darkness. Unknown to anyone at the recruitment station, events were already in motion that would test David's abilities sooner than anyone expected. Deep in the void between galaxies, ancient entities were stirring, drawn by the expanding presence of galactic civilization. The Devourers, beings of pure entropy that consumed entire realities, had finally noticed this small cluster of stars and planets teeming with organized life. The Galactic Defense Corps would need every advantage they could find in the coming war, and a young human with an unusual gift for solving impossible problems might be exactly what they needed. David Chun had no way of knowing that his recruitment trials were just the beginning of a journey that would ultimately determine the fate of every living being in the galaxy. As the recruitment station returned to its normal routine, Commander Zefix found himself looking forward to receiving regular reports about the humans' progress. Something told him that David Chun would either become one of the Corps' greatest assets or die trying to achieve something impossible. Either outcome would be fascinating to observe. The Corps training facility on Gamma Station orbited a neutron star whose gravitational fields provided the perfect environment for testing soldiers under extreme conditions. David Chun arrived aboard a transport vessel filled with recruits from 17 different species, each one having passed their own recruitment trials to earn a place in the most elite military force in known space. The first thing David noticed was how the other recruits looked at him. Whispers followed him through the corridors, and he caught fragments of conversation in various alien languages. The universal translators made their opinions crystal clear. The human was too young, too small, too primitive to belong among seasoned warriors from advanced civilizations. "Look at it," sneered Vectar, a towering Krogan warrior whose species had been perfecting military tactics for over 50,000 years. "The humans send us a child to play soldier with real warriors." David ignored the comments, focusing instead on studying his fellow recruits. Each species brought different advantages to the table. The Krogans were incredibly strong and virtually fearless in combat. The ethereal vanguard possessed natural psychic abilities that made them excellent at coordinating team movements. The silicon-based architects could interface directly with technology in ways that organic beings never could. Attention, recruits! The voice boomed across the station's central assembly hall, causing even the largest warriors to fall silent. General Thane strode onto the central platform, his cybernetic implants gleaming in the artificial light. The general was a legend throughout the galaxy, having commanded successful defense operations against threats that most beings couldn't even imagine. "Welcome to Gamma Station," General Thane continued, his enhanced voice carrying easily through the massive chamber. "You have all passed recruitment trials that prove you possess the basic capabilities required for core service. Now you will learn whether you have what it takes to actually serve." The general's gaze swept across the assembled recruits, pausing briefly on David before continuing. "The next phase of your training will last 6 standard months. You will be organized into mixed-species squads and subjected to progressively more challenging scenarios. The mortality rate for advanced training is approximately 15%. Those who survive and excel will be assigned to active duty stations throughout the galaxy." David felt a chill run down his spine. 15% mortality meant that roughly 30 of the 200 recruits in this assembly would not survive training. This wasn't a simulation or a test. It was preparation for real warfare against threats that could exterminate entire civilizations. "Squad assignments are now active on your personal data terminals," General Thane announced. "Report to your designated training areas immediately. Training begins now." David checked his terminal and discovered he had been assigned to Squad 7, along with 11 other recruits from various species. The squad leader was listed as Sergeant Major Crix, a Saurian veteran with over 40 years of combat experience. Their training area was located in Section Delta, one of the station's high-gravity zones where the neutron star's influence created crushing pressure that would test even the strongest beings. Squad 7 assembled in a cramped briefing room that felt more like a military bunker than a classroom. David found himself surrounded by beings that represented some of the most formidable warrior cultures in the galaxy. Besides Vectar the Krogan, there was Silence Between Stars, an umbral assassin whose species existed partially outside normal space-time. Forge Song was a mechanical architect whose body was more computer than organism. Moon Whisper represented the feline hegemony, her species renowned for reflexes that bordered on precognitive. "Listen up, maggots!" Sergeant Major Crix exploded into the room like a force of nature, his reptilian features twisted into an expression of barely contained rage. "I've been training core soldiers since before most of your species discovered spaceflight, and I can already tell that half of you won't survive the first week." The sergeant's gaze fixed on David with particular intensity. "Especially you, human. I don't know what political games got your primitive species included in this program, but this is not a place for children to play pretend soldier." "With respect, Sergeant Major," David replied calmly. "I'm here to learn, train, and prepare to defend the innocent. Political considerations don't interest me." Crix's eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. "We'll see how long that attitude lasts when you're facing real combat situations. Squad 7, you have 30 minutes to familiarize yourselves with your gear, and then we begin combat simulations." Moo. The gear room contained enough advanced military equipment to outfit a small army. David examined the standard-issue armor, weapons, and support systems with professional interest. The technology was centuries ahead of anything humanity had developed, but the basic principles remained familiar. Armor was meant to protect vital areas while maintaining mobility. Weapons were designed to eliminate threats efficiently. Support systems provided tactical information and communication capabilities. "Need help figuring out how to put on armor, human?" Vectar asked mockingly, demonstrating the ease with which he donned his own equipment. "Actually, yes," David replied without embarrassment. "This is my first time with core standard gear. Any advice would be appreciated." The honesty in David's response caught several squad members off guard. Most new recruits try to fake competence rather than admitting their limitations. Moonwhisper approached and began explaining the armor's adjustment systems, while Forge Song demonstrated proper weapon calibration techniques. Interesting, Silence Between Stars observed, her voice carrying the ethereal quality that characterized her species. The human acknowledges weakness without shame. This suggests either profound confidence or profound stupidity. We'll find out which, David said with a slight smile. The first combat simulation threw Squad 7 into a scenario based on actual core operations from the previous year. They were tasked with infiltrating a Hive collective stronghold to rescue captured civilians while avoiding detection by enemy forces that outnumbered them 50-1. Most squads approached such scenarios with overwhelming firepower, attempting to blast through enemy defenses before they could organize effective resistance. David suggested a different strategy during their brief planning session. "What if we don't fight them at all?" he proposed, studying the tactical display. "The Hive operates on strict hierarchical principles. If we can identify and eliminate their command nodes, the remaining forces will become disorganized and predictable." "Coward strategy," Vectar growled. "Real warriors face their enemies in honest battle. Real warriors complete their missions with minimal casualties," David replied evenly. "Dead heroes don't save civilians." The debate continued for several minutes before Sergeant Major Crix cut them off. "Enough. The human strategy is tactically sound, even if it lacks honor. We'll proceed with infiltration rather than direct assault." The simulation began in what appeared to be an industrial facility crawling with insectoid hive drones. Each drone was equipped with energy weapons capable of cutting through standard armor, and they moved with the coordinated efficiency that made the Hive Collective such a formidable threat. David led the infiltration, using his smaller size to navigate ventilation systems and maintenance tunnels that larger squad members couldn't access. He identified command nodes by observing communication patterns between different drone units, marking priority targets for elimination. "Forge Song, can you interface with their command network?" David asked over the squad's communication channel. "Affirmative. However, direct interface carries risk of detection and possible systems corruption." "Do it anyway. We need to know where the civilians are being held." The mechanical warrior extended crystalline interface tendrils into the facility's computer systems, his consciousness merging temporarily with alien technology. Within seconds, he had located the prisoners and identified the most efficient extraction route. "Civilians located in Section C7, Forge Song reported. Recommend immediate extraction before scheduled processing begins." David coordinated squad movements with surgical precision, using each member's unique capabilities to maximum advantage. Silence Between Stars eliminated sentries by phasing through walls and attacking from unexpected angles. Moonwhisper's incredible reflexes allowed her to disable security systems faster than they could sound alarms. Vectar's brute strength proved invaluable for clearing blocked passages and creating emergency exit routes. The civilian extraction proceeded flawlessly until they encountered an unexpected complication. The facility's main command center contained not just standard hive drones, but a Queen-class organism capable of coordinating defensive operations across multiple star systems. "Mission parameters have changed," Sergeant Major Crix announced grimly. "That Queen represents a Class Alpha threat to galactic security. New objective: eliminate the Queen and extract all intelligence data from her command systems." Fighting a Hive Queen was the kind of operation normally assigned to full core battalions with heavy weapon support. Squad 7 possessed nothing more than standard infantry equipment and their own individual capabilities. Most rational military doctrine would classify the mission as suicide. "I have an idea," David said quietly, studying the Queen's defensive arrangements. "But it's going to require perfect timing and probably violate several provisions of the Galactic combat regulations." "Explain," Crix ordered. "The Queen's psychic network connects her directly to every drone in the facility. If we can overload that network with conflicting information, she'll be temporarily incapacitated. Forge Song can create a feedback loop in their command systems while Silence Between Stars phases into the command chamber to plan explosive charges. What about the civilian prisoners? Moonwhisper asked. Vector and the rest of the squad extract them while the Queen is distracted. The explosion will create enough confusion for everyone to escape before reinforcements arrive. The plan was audacious, dangerous, and completely insane by conventional military standards. It also represented the only realistic chance of accomplishing both mission objectives without losing half the squad. Do it, Crix decided. The next 3 minutes represented some of the most intense combat any of Squad 7 had ever experienced. Forge Song interfaced with the Queen's command network while simultaneously fighting off digital attacks from her defensive programs. Silence Between Stars phased through reality itself to plant charges in the command chamber while avoiding the Queen's psychic detection abilities. Vector led the civilian extraction with brutal efficiency, his strength allowing him to carry wounded prisoners who couldn't move under their own power. David coordinated the entire operation while engaging enemy forces with precision marksmanship, each shot carefully calculated to eliminate threats without alerting nearby patrol units. When the Queen realized what was happening and began focusing her attention on him specifically, he used her fixation to buy precious seconds for his squad mates to complete their tasks. The explosive charges detonated exactly on schedule, collapsing the command chamber and severing the Queen's connection to her drone network. The sudden loss of coordination created chaos throughout the facility, allowing Squad 7 to extract all civilians and escape before enemy reinforcements could organize pursuit. Simulation complete, the computer announced. Mission objectives achieved with 0 casualties. Squad performance rating, exceptional. Sergeant Major Crix stared at the results display with barely concealed amazement. In 30 years of running training simulations, he had never seen a recruit squad successfully complete a Queen elimination scenario on their first attempt. How? He asked, addressing the question to David specifically. Human tactical doctrine emphasizes adaptability over adherence to established procedures, David replied. We're taught to evaluate each situation independently rather than applying standard solutions. And where did you learn to coordinate such complex operations? My brother taught me that leadership isn't about giving orders. It's about helping people accomplish things they didn't know they could do. The second week of training focused on individual specialization. Each recruit was assigned to intensive instruction in their chosen field of expertise while continuing group exercises with their squad. David had requested assignment to strategic operations, a field normally reserved for officers with decades of experience. You want to study what? Commander Voss, the strategic operations instructor, looked at David as if he had announced his intention to juggle live grenades. Strategic planning is not a field for junior personnel. It requires understanding political dynamics, resource management, long-term threat assessment, and dozens of other disciplines that take years to master. I understand the challenges, sir, David replied respectfully. But I believe my species' perspective on conflict resolution might offer valuable insights. Commander Voss was a Zentaurian, whose species had evolved from hive-minded insects before developing individual consciousness. His compound eyes studied David with the intensity of someone trying to solve a particularly complex puzzle. Very well, Voss decided. You'll be given access to historical case studies and theoretical exercises. However, you'll be held to the same standards as senior officers. Failure to maintain passing grades will result in immediate reassignment to basic infantry training. The strategic operations curriculum covered everything from small unit tactics to galaxy-wide resource allocation. David found himself studying conflicts that had shaped the development of entire civilizations, learning from both victories and catastrophic defeats that had cost billions of lives. One case study particularly captured his attention: the Void War, a conflict that had erupted 300 years ago when entities from outside normal space-time began consuming star systems throughout the Outer Rim territories. The Galactic Defense Corps had eventually achieved victory, but at enormous cost. Entire species had been rendered extinct, and whole regions of space remained uninhabitable. The key mistake, David observed during a classroom discussion, was assuming that beings from outside our reality would respond to conventional military strategies. The Corps kept trying to fight them like they were just another hostile species instead of recognizing that they operated according to completely different principles. Commander Voss's compound eyes focused intently on his human student. Elaborate. The void entities weren't trying to conquer territory or acquire resources. They were trying to reduce organized matter back to primordial chaos. Fighting them with traditional military force was like trying to stop entropy with brute strength. The Corps should have focused on understanding their fundamental nature rather than just building bigger weapons. And how would you have approached the conflict differently? David considered his response carefully. I would have prioritized research over retaliation. Instead of massive fleet engagements, I would have used small, highly mobile units to gather intelligence about their capabilities and limitations. Once we understood what they were and what they wanted, we could have developed targeted countermeasures instead of just throwing ships at them until something worked. The classroom fell silent. David's analysis contradicted conventional military wisdom, yet his reasoning was undeniably sound. The Void War had indeed been won through scientific breakthrough rather than military victory, when Corps researchers finally developed technology that could stabilize matter against entropic decay. Interesting perspective, Commander Voss admitted. Your analysis demonstrates understanding of strategic principles that most officers don't develop until after years of field experience. Meanwhile, Squad 7 continued their group training exercises with steadily increasing difficulty. They faced scenarios based on actual Corps operations, including some that had resulted in significant casualties among veteran units. Yet somehow, under David's unconventional leadership, they continued to achieve mission success with minimal losses. The breakthrough moment came during their 4th week of training, when Squad 7 was presented with a scenario that had historically been classified as unwinnable. The exercise involved defending a civilian population center against overwhelming enemy forces while cut off from reinforcement or resupply. Previous squads had attempted the scenario using traditional defensive strategies, establishing perimeters, and fighting holding actions until their ammunition ran out. David proposed something radically different. What if we don't defend the city? He suggested during their planning session. What if we make the enemy defend it instead? Explain, Sergeant Major Crix ordered, though his tone suggested he thought the human had finally lost his mind. The enemy wants to capture the city intact because it contains valuable infrastructure and resources. If we threaten to destroy those assets, they'll be forced to modify their attack strategy to preserve what they're trying to capture. David's plan involved rigging the city's power grid, water treatment facilities, and communication networks with demolition charges while broadcasting clear intentions to destroy everything rather than allow it to fall into enemy hands. The attacking forces would have to shift from overwhelming assault to careful precision operations, negating their numerical advantage. It's brilliant, Moon Whisper breathed, her feline features showing genuine admiration. Instead of fighting their strength, we force them to fight on terms that favor us. The simulation proved even more successful than David had hoped. Faced with the choice between capturing a destroyed city or modifying their assault strategy, the enemy forces became bogged down in complex urban warfare where Squad 7's superior training and coordination gave them decisive advantages. Impossible, General Thane muttered, reviewing the simulation results from his command center. That scenario has defeated every squad we've tested, including veteran units with years of combat experience. Sir, his aide reported, Squad 7 achieved complete mission success with 0 civilian casualties and minimal ammunition expenditure. Their tactical approach has been classified as revolutionary by the Strategic Analysis Division. General Thane pulled up detailed recordings of David's leadership during the exercise, studying the young human's decision-making process with growing fascination. There was something almost intuitive about the way he approached complex problems, as if he could see solutions that remained invisible to others. Send a priority message to Corps High Command, General Thane ordered. Human recruit David Chen demonstrates exceptional strategic capabilities. Recommend immediate acceleration through remaining training phases and assignment to Special Operations Division. The message was transmitted within the hour, reaching decision-makers who were already closely monitoring human integration into core operations. David Chen's performance was generating attention at the highest levels of galactic military leadership. Unknown to anyone at the training facility, that attention would soon prove crucial. Deep space monitoring stations have begun detecting anomalous readings from the galactic rim, energy signatures that matched historical records from the Void War. Ancient enemies were stirring once again, and the galaxy would need every advantage it could find in the coming darkness. David Chun had no way of knowing that his unconventional approaches to problem-solving would soon be tested against threats that could extinguish all life in the galaxy. His training was about to become very real very quickly. As Squad 7 prepared for their final training exercises, none of them realized that they were about to face challenges that would determine not just their own fates, but the survival of every living being in known space. The emergency klaxons began wailing throughout Gamma Station at 0347 local time, dragging David from deep sleep into instant alertness. Red warning lights bathed the recruit quarters in hellish illumination, while automated voices announced a station-wide combat alert in 17 different languages. All personnel to emergency stations immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. David rolled out of his bunk and began pulling on his armor with practiced efficiency, muscle memory taking over while his mind processed the implications. Combat alerts during training were rare, and when they occurred, they usually meant something catastrophically bad was happening somewhere in the galaxy. Squad 7 assembled in their designated area within minutes, each member displaying the readiness that had been drilled into them through weeks of intensive training. Sergeant Major Crix appeared almost immediately, his reptilian features grim with barely controlled tension. "Listen up, maggots," Crix growled, though his usual hostility was replaced by something approaching respect. "This is the real thing. Deep space monitoring stations have detected massive energy signatures approaching from beyond the galactic rim. Preliminary analysis suggests we're looking at void entities, possibly an entire invasion fleet." The squad exchanged glances of barely contained fear. The Void War had ended 3 centuries ago, but every species in the galaxy maintained detailed historical records of that conflict. Entire star systems had been consumed, billions of lives lost, and whole civilizations reduced to scattered refugees. "Sir," Moon Whisper asked, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation, "what are our orders?" "Squad 7 has been selected for immediate deployment to the research station at Kepler 78, Crix announced. "Your mission is to provide security for a joint scientific team attempting to develop countermeasures against void incursion technology. This is a volunteer mission. The survival rate for operations involving void entities is approximately 30%. David raised his hand without hesitation. "I volunteer, sir." One by one, the rest of Squad 7 followed his example. Vector, despite his earlier contempt for human weakness, nodded grimly. Forge Song's mechanical systems hummed with determination. Silence between stars simply materialized her agreement through subtle shifts in local reality. Moon Whisper's predatory smile suggested she was looking forward to the challenge. "Outstanding," Crix said, and for the first time since training began, he actually sounded proud of his recruits. "Transport departs in 20 minutes. Gear up for extended combat operations in unknown hostile territory." The journey to Kepler 78 took 18 hours aboard a core fast attack transport, giving David time to study everything available about void entities and previous countermeasures. The classified files made for disturbing reading. Void beings existed partially outside normal space-time, making them nearly immune to conventional weapons. They consumed organized matter at the quantum level, breaking down complex structures and returning them to primordial chaos. Fascinating reading. Commander Voss approached David's study station, his compound eyes reflecting concern. The strategic operations instructor had been assigned to the scientific team as a military liaison. Terrifying reading, David corrected. These things aren't just another hostile alien species. They're like a fundamental force of nature, entropy given consciousness and directed purpose. Precisely, Voss agreed, which is why previous military strategies proved so ineffective. You can't fight entropy with conventional weapons any more than you can stop gravity with a plasma rifle. David continued studying the files, paying particular attention to the few successful engagements from the previous war. A pattern began emerging, subtle but consistent. The most effective operations had focused not on destroying void entities, but on preventing them from affecting local space-time. "Commander," David said slowly, "what if we're approaching this wrong? What if instead of trying to fight them directly, we focused on making it impossible for them to operate in our reality?" Elaborate. Every successful engagement involves some form of reality stabilization technology. The entities can only affect our universe when local space-time becomes unstable enough for them to manipulate. If we can maintain quantum coherence in threatened areas, they become essentially powerless. Commander Voss stared at his human student with growing amazement. David had identified the core principle that had taken core scientists years to understand during the previous war. "That's exactly the research focus at Kepler 78, Voss admitted. "The question is whether we can develop practical applications fast enough to matter." Kepler 78 was a dead system, its star having burned out millions of years ago, leaving behind only frozen planets orbiting a white dwarf remnant. The research station had been established specifically because the stable gravitational environment provided ideal conditions for quantum mechanics research. Dr. Elithai, the station's chief scientist, was an ethereal whose species existed naturally in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Her ability to perceive reality from different perspectives made her uniquely qualified to study void phenomena. "The situation is worse than initial reports suggested," she explained during the mission briefing, her translucent form shimmering with anxiety. "Our deep space sensors have identified at least 12 major incursion points along the galactic rim. Each one represents a potential pathway for void entities to enter normal spacetime." David studied the tactical display showing known incursion sites. The pattern was troubling, suggesting coordinated intelligence rather than random dimensional instability. "Doctor, are these incursion points natural phenomena or artificially created?" "Unknown," Dr. Elithai admitted. "Void entities operate according to physics we don't fully understand. However, the systematic nature of their appearance suggests deliberate action rather than random occurrence." "Then, we're not just facing another invasion," David concluded grimly. "We're facing an organized campaign by beings who have learned from their previous defeat." The research station buzzed with frantic activity as scientists from dozens of species worked around the clock to develop new countermeasures. The basic principle was understood. Reality stabilization technology could prevent void entities from affecting local space-time. The challenge lay in creating devices powerful enough to protect entire star systems while remaining portable enough for practical deployment. Squad 7 was assigned to provide security for the research teams while maintaining readiness for rapid deployment to threatened areas. It should have been a routine assignment, but David couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with their situation. "The timing bothers me," he confided to Moon Whisper during a quiet moment in the station's observation deck. "Why now?" The void entities were dormant for 3 centuries. What changed? Perhaps they needed time to recover from their previous defeat, Moon Whisper suggested, her feline features thoughtful. Or perhaps they needed time to develop new strategies. Or perhaps something else happened that we don't know about. David's concerns proved prophetic when the station's long-range sensors detected an incoming transmission from the galactic core. The message was encrypted with the highest levels of core security protocols, indicating information of critical importance. Priority Alpha message from High Command. General Thane's image appeared on the main communication screen, his cybernetic implants flickering with urgent data streams. All research stations are to implement maximum security protocols immediately. Intelligence reports suggest void entities possess detailed information about our current countermeasure research. The briefing room fell silent as the implications became clear. Someone or something was providing the void entities with intelligence about core operations. "Sir," David asked, raising his hand, "are we dealing with infiltration by compromised personnel, or do the entities possess some form of remote surveillance capability?" "Unknown," General Thane admitted. "However, all research teams are ordered to assume their work is being monitored by hostile forces. Implement appropriate operational security measures." Dr. Elithai's translucent form shimmered with barely controlled fear. "If they know what we're developing, they can prepare specific countermeasures. We could be helping them become immune to our only effective weapons." David studied the tactical situation with growing concern. The Corps was caught in a paradox. They needed to develop better countermeasures, but doing so might provide their enemies with the information needed to defeat those same countermeasures. "What if we're thinking about this backwards?" David suggested. "Instead of trying to hide our research, what if we use their surveillance against them?" "Explain," Commander Voss ordered. "We know they're watching our work, so we give them something to watch that benefits us rather than them. We conduct visible research into countermeasures we know won't work while secretly developing the real solutions." Dr. Elithai's form brightened with sudden understanding. "A deception operation. We feed them false information while concealing our actual progress." "Exactly. And if we're really clever, we can use their surveillance to learn more about their capabilities." The deception operation began immediately. The research team split into two groups: a large, visible team that worked on obviously flawed countermeasure designs while broadcasting their progress on standard communication channels, and a smaller, hidden team that pursued genuine solutions in complete secrecy. David found himself assigned to the deception team, helping to develop countermeasures that appeared promising but contained subtle flaws that would prevent them from actually working. The challenge lay in making the fake research convincing enough to fool entities whose understanding of physics far exceeded anything the galaxy had achieved. "The irony is beautiful," Forgesong observed, his mechanical consciousness perfectly suited to developing convincingly flawed technology. "We are using their superior intelligence against them by giving them accurate but incomplete information." 3 days into the deception operation, the station's sensors detected an approaching vessel of unknown configuration. The ship appeared on long-range scanners as a dark void in space, visible only because it blocked background starlight. "All personnel to combat stations," the station commander announced. "Unknown vessel approaching at high velocity. Preliminary analysis suggests void entity technology." Squad 7 took positions throughout the research station, each member assigned to protect critical personnel and equipment. David found himself guarding Dr. Elithai's laboratory, where the real countermeasure research was taking place. "Whatever happens," Dr. Elithai said quietly, "the research data must not fall into their hands. The quantum stabilization matrices we've developed could be reversed to destabilize reality instead of protecting it." "Understood," David replied, checking his weapon systems. "How close are you to a working prototype?" "Hours, possibly less. The theoretical framework is complete, but practical implementation requires precise calibration of quantum field generators." The station shuddered as the unknown vessel achieved docking configuration. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically, dividing the facility into isolated sections to prevent rapid decompression if hull integrity was breached. "Contact with unknown entities confirmed," security reported. "They appear to be humanoid, but emit energy signatures consistent with void technology." David felt his blood turn to ice. Humanoid entities using void technology suggested something far worse than a simple invasion. It implied collaboration between void beings and someone from normal space-time. "Squad 7, converge on Research Section Alpha," Sergeant Major Crix commanded. "Priority is protecting scientific personnel and research data." David moved through the station's corridors with practiced efficiency, his training allowing him to navigate the complex layout while remaining alert for potential threats. The emergency lighting cast strange shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. He reached Dr. Elithai's laboratory to find the scientist in frantic communication with her hidden research team. The quantum matrices are responding, but we need more time for proper calibration. Time we may not have, David replied, sealing the laboratory's blast doors. Can a prototype be moved if we need to evacuate? Negative. The quantum field generators require stable environmental conditions. Moving them now would destroy weeks of work. The station's lights flickered as something began interfering with the primary power systems. Emergency generators activated automatically, but the backup illumination cast an ominous red glow throughout the facility. Unknown entities have breached Security Section Beta, security reported. All personnel in affected areas implement evacuation procedures immediately. David studied the facility schematic on his tactical display. Security Section Beta was only 2 levels away from Dr. Elithai's laboratory. Whatever had boarded the station was moving systematically toward the research areas. Doctor, how much more time do you need? Minimum 15 minutes for basic calibration. 30 minutes for full operational capability. We'll hold them for 30 minutes. David activated his communication system and contacted the rest of Squad 7. All squad members converge on Research Section Alpha. We have unknown hostiles moving toward our position. Rules of engagement. Protect the research at all costs. The first hostile contact came sooner than expected. David was monitoring the laboratory security systems when the outer blast doors began glowing with heat. Something was cutting through 3 meters of reinforced metal as if it were paper. Contact imminent, David reported. Doctor, whatever you're going to do it faster. The blast doors failed with a sound like thunder, revealing figures that had once been humanoid, but were now something else entirely. Their bodies flickered between solid matter and empty void, while their movements defied conventional physics. They phased through walls when convenient, but remained solid enough to manipulate technology. Void touched, David breathed, recognizing the entities from classified intelligence reports. These were beings from normal space-time who had been corrupted by prolonged exposure to void energy, becoming hybrid entities that retained intelligence while gaining reality-manipulating abilities. The battle that followed was unlike anything David had experienced during training. Conventional weapons proved largely ineffective against enemies who could phase out of reality to avoid projectiles while remaining solid enough to use their own energy-based attacks. The squad found themselves fighting an enemy that could appear and disappear at will while striking from unexpected angles. Fall back to the inner laboratory, David commanded, coordinating his squad's movements while engaging multiple hostiles simultaneously. Establish a perimeter around Dr. Elithai's equipment. Vectar's incredible strength proved useful for creating physical barriers from laboratory furniture, while Moonwhisper's reflexes allowed her to track enemies that flickered in and out of existence. Forge Song interfaced directly with the station's systems, using environmental controls to create obstacles for the advancing hostiles. Quantum Matrix approaching critical resonance, Dr. Elithai announced. 5 more minutes, and we'll have a working prototype. The void-touched entities seemed to sense how close the research team was to success. Their attacks intensified, with more figures phasing through the station's hull to join the assault. David found himself coordinating defensive actions against enemies who could attack from any direction, including angles that shouldn't exist in normal 3-dimensional space. They're adapting to our tactics, Silence Between Stars observed, her ability to perceive multiple dimensions giving her unique insight into enemy capabilities. Each time we establish an effective defense, they modify their approach to circumvent it. Then, we need to be more adaptive than they are, David replied, studying the battle pattern for exploitable weaknesses. Forge Song, can you modulate the laboratory's lighting systems? Affirmative, but explanation required. The entities phase in and out of reality, but they still cast shadows when solid. If we can track their shadows, we can predict when and where they'll become vulnerable. The strategy proved remarkably effective. By carefully monitoring shadow patterns and timing their attacks to coincide with moments when the entities were forced to become solid, Squad 7 managed to eliminate several hostiles while protecting the research equipment. Quantum Matrix achieved stable resonance, Dr. Elithai announced triumphantly. Beginning field generation test. The prototype device activated with a sound like crystalline chimes, creating a visible distortion in the air around Dr. Elithai's equipment. The effect on the void-touched entities was immediate and dramatic. They began screaming in frequencies that hurt to hear, their forms becoming unstable as the quantum stabilization field prevented them from properly manipulating local reality. "It works," Dr. Elithai exclaimed. "The stabilization field prevents void entities from affecting normal space-time within its area of influence." David watched the remaining hostiles retreat in obvious distress, their ability to phase through reality severely compromised by the prototype's energy field. The battle was won, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it had been too easy. "Doctor, can you expand the field's area of effect?" "Theoretically, yes. The prototype is just a scaled-down